Good afternoon, and welcome to today's VetNet Career Connections Hangout entitled IVMF and VetAdvisor Veteran Job Retention Survey, where we will be going through the findings of this survey. My name is Michael Schmeling, and I'm the Program Manager for VetNet here at the Institute for Veterans and Military Families at Syracuse University. Today, I'll be introducing two of my colleagues who will be taking you through the findings and answering any of your questions. First up is James Schmeling, Co-founder and Managing Director of Programs here at the IVMF. Secondly is Nick Armstrong, Senior Director of Research and Policy here at the IVMF. So James, I'll turn things over to you.
Great, thanks very much, Mike. I appreciate it. So Nick joining me is from our research team, and he and our researchers did a really great survey earlier this year with VetAdvisor. And VetAdvisor and the Institute for Veterans and Military Families were really focused on understanding first job turnover. Why do veterans leave a first job, and what kinds of things would make a difference in retaining veterans and enabling them to find the right career fit in their first job and having an easier post-service career entry and continuing an ongoing transition. So I'm actually going to go through the results of the survey and share most of those results with you. Overall, what we wanted to understand begins primarily on page 3 of the report, and those findings really go towards what the biggest opportunities and obstacles are, and particularly what the challenges were that veterans identified when they were looking for opportunities in civilian employment. I guess probably the most important thing first is that veterans are saying that they had great difficulty finding opportunities that matched their military training and experience and that took advantage of the skills and abilities that they brought to the civilian workforce. And I think this is very important to understand, because what it says is that veterans, like others, want to find meaningful work that taps into all of their abilities and skills and utilizes those to their greatest advantage. The challenge here is that oftentimes veterans don't necessarily understand how to translate what it is that they did in their military service into sector-specific areas in the civilian side. So I'll give an example. I have a veteran who has been working extensively on transitioning an entire unit in the Army from the U.S. over to Afghanistan, and then later transitioning that entire unit back. They generally gloss over that transition because the reason that they're there is to fight, to defend the country, to make opportunities to strengthen the civilians and civilian organizations and military organizations overseas. So they discuss widely what it is that they did, the deployments they did, the patrols that they did, and so on. Those things may not have as much relevance directly to the civilian sector. But that logistics operation, transitioning many thousands of people and all of the equipment and belongings from the U.S. to halfway around the world, is the type of logistics skill set that many in the civilian world find great value in. But helping them understand that is really a critical component of it. Helping them understand exactly what they should focus on, how they should portray that, how they can communicate what it is that they did and how they did it in ways that will make a difference. Once they do those kinds of things, I think the opportunities to use their skills and abilities will become more apparent to civilian employers, to hiring managers, and to recruiters, and that will make a big difference. I think the second component here that really is important is that regardless of the number of jobs people held or how many times they turned over, there's a positive association between job alignment and job tenure with what they prefer to do. So if they're in a career field that they like, doing something that is meaningful to them, they're more likely to stay in those roles. And I think that that really is a component that's important for them to understand before they transition. Because if they can begin to identify what are the opportunities that they're interested in, where do those opportunities exist, what preparation do they need for that, whether that's civilian sector education and training, even a higher education degree, they can begin doing those things before they begin the job search and then make the transition. Nick, is there anything that you want to add to these overall highlighted findings at the beginning?
No, I think that was great, James. You know, one thing I will highlight too is just some of the key statistics that came out of it. You know, just about half that were surveyed left their job within that first year, and almost 65% left within 2 years. So taken with the other findings that there is a clear link between, the job tenure and trying to find that right career fit. I think it goes both ways. You talked about how transitioning military service members need to find ways to be able to tailor their resume and their job search, but at the same time, you can also think about employers, would need more education or could use more education in terms of trying to identify those military skills and then provide tools that help them in that job search. So it's really a two-way street.
Thanks, Nick. I think to that point, there are a couple of coalitions that are focused on working with business and industry that are very important in this role, and that actually will allow recruiters and hiring managers to understand what are the strengths and weaknesses of their career programs for veterans. The 100,000 Jobs Mission, and that's available at 100,000jobsmission.com, just released a report today with RAND studying the 100,000 Jobs Mission and focusing on key drivers of veteran career initiatives and sharing practices. They looked at the 175 companies that are part of the 100,000 Jobs Mission and looked at the fact that they collectively had hired 190,000 veterans. The things that they focused on, however, were that we needed to better understand how veterans contribute to those companies and the retention and career sustainability initiatives that they have, the retention pieces in particular. I'm going to talk now a little bit about the first set of results, which are the biggest obstacles specifically. And Jim, this is on page 4 of the PDF document, if you can advance it to that. I'm going to go in the order that these are listed here. First off is lack of employment opportunities in the area that the veteran is in. And I think this is really important because as a veteran or as somebody who's transitioning from the military, geography is very important. Many people return either to their home of record where their initial enlistment took place, or they stay in their last duty station and don't go anywhere else or even consider anywhere else until they're already out of service. I think one of the things that's really important for veterans who are thinking about their first job is to identify what the career opportunities are that they want and then where they are. And to that point, we just did some work with USAA identifying best places to live and aligning those best places based on your career stage, whether it's to get education or find a career or the best places to retire. But thinking about those things in advance with the tools that are available is likely to give you a significant leg up in thinking about your first job post-service. The second component is really, again, what we talked about earlier, finding employment opportunities that match military experience. And that's a two-way street, as Nick said. Finding the opportunity that matches your career experience and what you want to do, and employers seeing the connection between what they need done and what you have the ability to do. I'm not going to go into depth anymore on that one at the moment. I think the third thing is finding employment opportunities that match your education. And 53% of people said that they were not finding opportunities that give the opportunity here to match their education. Interestingly, this is a twofold component of it, which is that there are sometimes people who are underemployed and others who are not yet well enough educated for a particular role that they desire. The good news here is that there are a lot of transition programs, including the post 9/11 GI Bill, which can be used for career education, vocational education, or traditional undergraduate and graduate education. So thinking about what are the employment opportunities that match your education, and then thinking about how can you gain the education that you need if you're undereducated, or how can you make sure that you're not underemployed by thinking about where you go and what you're going to do, become very, very important. Some work that we're doing here includes a veteran vocational accelerator program that we're doing with Walmart's foundation and about 12 community colleges around the country, and that's in our community engagement piece of work at the Institute for Veterans and Military Families site. We identify which those community colleges are that are working on these issues, and I think that that might be a useful resource as well. We'll actually post these in the comments on the chat and then also afterwards in the YouTube archive, and I think we're going to get those up here very shortly as well. And the next time that I turn it over to Nick, I'll go and grab a couple of those resources for the RAND report and others. I think the need for flexible scheduling becomes an important issue for some people. Only 9.87% said that this was an issue, but really we think that those are around two primary issues. One is family responsibilities, caregiving, and so on, and the other is around need for medical care and follow-up that might exist, particularly if the care is obtained from the Veterans Administration, where there may need to be some flexible arrangements for travel time to go to rural locations that are at a distance, or for available appointments that could be difficult to schedule in some cases. Another area of focus was physical health care needs and whether or not an employment opportunity would allow those, or mental health care needs and whether or not an employment opportunity would allow for the mental health care that an individual needs, whether that's time or flexibility or availability of benefits or other kinds of things. So those were the obstacles that folks identified during the survey. Nick, do you want to add anything to that component of this?
No, I mean, just in terms of thinking about the the finding itself too. I mean, it really ties back to geography as well, and I think it behooves veterans to kind of go the extra mile in terms of doing the research in terms of different areas that may be more or less friendly to veterans themselves in terms of understanding the opportunities. So that's all.
Fantastic, thank you very much. And I'm just typing in the URL for the 100,000 Jobs mission and for the RAND report. So those are both available now in the chat window. And Mike and Jim, if you could transition those over so folks can see them, that would be great. So moving on to the next page, this was the first military job post-service and the length of tenure. And as you can see from the graph here on the page, a lot of folks stayed in their first job. But there's a differentiation between who were enlisted and officers, with about almost double the percentage of officers staying in their first job. And we think in part that this represents better research by them as they're thinking about their first job post-career, and that enlisted members perhaps are not having enough opportunity to think about that, either because they don't have time or because that's not their focus at the beginning of their transition period. A lot of folks are leaving between 0 and 6 months of those who did leave, and between 7 and 12 months, or between 1 year and 2. But if you make it past 2 years, it's probably because you found the right fit. So again, that's a demonstration that that fit component is very, very important. And we see again some differentiation between officers and enlisted at the 0 to 6 months mark, with enlisted folks transitioning more quickly. Part of that transition is probably due to wage differentials, taking a first job that's available with a lower wage than what you need to support yourself and your family, and then having an opportunity to transition into a better job. And we'll talk a little bit about reasons for that first transition as well in a little bit, that will shed some light on that component of it. Nick, anything you want to add in that section?
No, in terms of this section too, I just what the findings kind of strike me too is kind of this. There's the military culture of wanting to continuously show improvement in your career, and so I just wonder, if part of this this turnover of finding new opportunity are soldiers and service members looking for new opportunity, as like that turnover itself is not necessarily a bad thing, as they're actually finding new work and finding a fit. There's almost a learning process, over those first couple of years out of service.
I think that's an excellent point, and in fact, I think on the next page we see that borne out, because 43.28% of all of the respondents actually left because of a new employment opportunity. So they weren't leaving just because of a poor fit; they were leaving for something better in most cases. And I think that that's really, really important. On the other side of it, though, people are leaving because of a lack of career development and advancement, which is, I think, the other side of that same coin, because we always are very conscious of what our next step is, how do we get promoted, and we understand that in the service. When we don't see that in the civilian sector, I think that we tend to think about what our next job is and how we can make that change. There's a message here for employers that I think is very important, and that is to talk to your veteran employees about what are opportunities for career change, advancement, development, and if you're not used to doing that, that's something that you may have to do a little bit differently with veteran employees than with others. Again, I think similarly, the quality of work being not meaningful or not challenging or tedious even was another reason for turnover. And then about 28% said inadequate compensation and benefits was a reason. So they were leaving for better compensation and benefits in many opportunities. And there are a whole host of other reasons that are here, but for the most part, it was really very much in line with that narrative. Nick, I think the opportunities, the lack of career advancement or quality of work or better job opportunity. So maybe that is that up or out mentality that some of us are bringing to the table. Thanks. Anything you'd like to add to that?
No, I mean, it's pretty, I mean, this question itself, I'm not that surprised by the findings, but again, the message for employers is that, you know, veterans are looking to advance and excel in your workforce. So it, you know, it behooves them to, if they want to attract them and then retain them, to offer you know, professional development opportunity as well, in addition to competitive pay and benefits.
Fantastic. So if I can go to the next slide, Jim, I think these are exactly those points as well. Why would you have stayed at your first job? Well, 60.1% almost said increased salary and benefits would have made the difference. And then the other 45% here, obviously these are multiple answers, so they don't add to 100%, but another 45% said that increased opportunities for career advancement and promotion would have made a difference, or increased opportunities for professional development at 33%. And then the other components of it really were about the quality of work, the work environment and culture, the interrelationships with the supervisors, managers, and coworkers, and satisfaction with the job security and employment status, full-time versus part-time, and so on. So those are the primary reasons, and again, I think those bode very well because these are good reasons for making transitions, because you wanted to have a better salary, you wanted to have opportunities for career advancement and promotion, and these tell the story of a motivated group that's looking to be able to employ their skills and abilities. Nick, anything you want to add?
No, I think you hit that on the head. I mean, just as a researcher thinking ahead in terms of how we might want to look at this in the future, I'm thinking about like how these different reasons for staying would vary by sector or by, you know, private versus government, federal service, and if there are different types of industries or sectors that veterans tend to be happier in, based on the meaningfulness of the work, as aligned with also the pay and benefits and opportunities.
Definitely agree with that. When we asked our next question, it was really about what are important aspects of employment to each individual, and they talk about the primary reasons being opportunities to use skills and abilities being the most important or very important for their employment. Compensation and pay, again, meaningfulness of job security. So we asked these questions in many different ways, and we got generally consistent reports. They want to be used to their fullest extent of their abilities. And I think this is very important for career retention and advancement purposes for business and industry to understand. Identifying what the veteran employees can do and how they can contribute, and then giving them the opportunity to make the most use out of their skills and benefits to benefit the company and add competitive advantage is probably the best way to ensure followed, of course, by compensation and pay, and making sure that competitive pay is there. I think this is a challenge, however, as well, that we have with some veterans who are really unaware of what compensation looks like in particular industries or geographic areas. We're all very used to being able to look at a pay scale for the military and understand how many years of service and what rank and what grade will get us what pay, and we're not necessarily fully well aware of how that works in the civilian world, and don't necessarily know how that varies geographically, you know, as compared to the only variation being basic allowance for quarters and a couple of living allowances and hazardous duty pay allowances and things like that that vary. Variations in sectors may matter a lot. Even if you're doing the same job from one industry to another, the pay levels might be very, very different. So it's an area where I think we need to help veterans understand and their family members understand compensation as well. All the way down on this, we have other kinds of opportunities here to improve relationships with coworkers, and I think many employee resource groups do that. I think there's the opportunity to bridge the military-civilian divide and veteran and civilian divide through employee resource groups, through networking opportunities and other things, and I think those are represented here as well. Nick, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I would just pile on in the sense that I think both folks on the outside, in terms of trying to help educate soldiers and service members on really what the expectations for compensation are, as well as the actual transferability of their skill sets. But also that also applies on leaders, which we've talked about that in the past in terms of leaders in the military helping educate service members before they leave in terms of knowing the real expectation of the limits and opportunities of their skill set and whether or not they're going to need to have a plan when they leave the service to either get new training or education to help find that alignment sooner, as opposed to having a trial and error with bouncing around different jobs till they find that fit.
Absolutely agree, and I was glad that we had the opportunity to co-author an article that was posted in Defense One. And Nick, if you could find that link and post it in the chat, we'll get that up there as well, because I do think that there is a leadership component here, that the NCOs and senior NCOs who have either transitioned successfully or helped others transition successfully have an opportunity to reach back into the service and help the folks who they've led and supervised make a similar transition and well-educated transition. As well, I think it's very important that people have an opportunity to participate in the transition assistance program and to make the most of that, and to even have family members participate in that to the extent that they can, and to share resources from that as well. I'm going to go ahead and go on to the next page, Jim. I'm going to talk a little bit about job tenure, and I think this is an interesting component. The majority, actually the highest minority, not the majority here, actually in the labor force have only had one job since separating from the military. Now, part of that might be time that they've been separated, but I think there's showing stability here with 23.32% of the people who are in the labor force only having had one job. Then you go down to 18% having held two, 17% three, and then I think maybe we get to some folks who have had a lot of transition, so 12% at 4 jobs and 8% at 5 jobs, and then 18% have had more than 6 jobs. So I suspect a lot of those are in lower paid opportunities that they've had a lot of transition, or in industry sectors where they've had a lot of transition, or in fields where it's common to move from employer to employer, because it's sort of a trend right back up to 6. So that's, I think, interesting data on numbers of folks who have had one or more jobs. And again, showing that a significant number have held only one job, so there is stability there. Nick, anything you want to add to that discussion?
Not to add, I think you covered it. The only thing that I'd be curious about is if there's a kind of a difference between the younger veterans and the millennial generation and their trends for turnover versus those who are older and have been in the workforce. Just wonder if there was something to learn there too.
I think there probably could be, and I think the fortunate thing is we did collect data around that, so we have some opportunity, I think, to go back and do some further analyses in this and share those results. Do you want to talk at all about plans to share further results, or just leave it as we're still continuing to analyze?
Still continuing to analyze for now.
Great. So let's go ahead and go to the next page with a graph on it, Jim. So it's 2 pages up. And this is the graphic with the number of jobs held since separating. And this does go a little bit to the point we were discussing earlier, which is those who have had 6 or less years since separating and those who have had more than 6 years. And it does sort of go along with that. Whether that's an age demographic or not, it certainly is related to whether you've been out a long time or not. And those who have held more than 6 jobs have been out more than 6 years since separating. And remember, this data could go all the way back to World War II veterans, so it could be an older generation who have responded there. Here is that 44% of those who have had 6 years or less since separating have still only held one job. So again, there is some some opportunity here to go into that first job, to have some stability for several years, and then only about 24% have had 2 jobs if they've been out for 6 years or less. So I think that does go to the points that we were discussing very nicely. Anything you want to add there, Nick?
No, I'm just taking a note here in terms of the demographics of the survey. Just to, you know, the median age is 48 years, and about 43% served for 20 years or more. So a good chunk of them were, it looks like they were military retirees as well.
So that's very interesting. So they might have stayed in this one job because it was the right job, combined with the income from retirement or other opportunities as well.
Right.
So at this point, that comes to the end of our results, and I just wanted to be able to share those results with our business and industry partners and veteran partners so that we would have an opportunity really to think through these things and share what we think was important from these findings. We hope that this has been an educational and useful opportunity for you to hear a little bit about our results, and we look forward to bringing you more. And at that point, I'm going to open it up for any questions if there are any.
We will take a look out on our YouTube stream right now, and we'll let you know in 1 second. I will take this opportunity to let you know, for those who are watching live and for those of you who will be watching after the fact, you can utilize the links to the RAND report on the 100,000 Jobs mission and the Defense One article by utilizing the Google Plus event page. You can simply search VetNet Career Connections and look up this event, and both links will be in there. We'll also make sure that they are out there on the YouTube live stream. In addition, I encourage all to go to vets.syr.edu, specifically our research and policy tab, where you can look at the research highlights and find this full report, as well as other surveys and research we've conducted. And the homepage at vets.syr.edu will give you the full myriad of what we do here at the Institute for Veterans and Military Families. So, James, I just got word that at this point there are no questions out there. Would you like to close things out?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, thank you for joining us. I'm glad that we had the opportunity to share some results from our research, and I'll turn it over to Nick for the last word.
I just want to echo James' comment. Thank you for this opportunity, and look forward to any further questions you may have in the future.
Okay, thank you to you both, and have a great afternoon, and we hope to see you all soon on a future VetNet Hangout.